Good afternoon, J3, and welcome back. I'm ready to read you chapter 13, but I'm not on my own today. So as you can see, the children who have been following the story so far have decided to join me in the classroom. So a big welcome to them. So sit back and enjoy the next chapter. I hadn't meant to say the last part out loud, but Pablo didn't tease me. He slid his hand into mine and squeezed gently, warm and rough. "Come on," he said, "we should get back." I picked up the satchel and boots, following him barefoot up the steep stone steps. The wind set about howling again. When we reached the top, there were lights and voices coming from one of the larger houses, and outside a fire burnt, protected from the wind by the high wall. A lone figure sat there. Pablo and I started towards the house, but as we neared the open front door, the governor's voice growled from beside the fire. "Come here, boy." I tensed. He had not looked up from the flames, but was indicating a spot next to him. We started towards him, but he clicked his fingers at Pablo. "Not you." "You all right?" Pablo murmured. "Hurry up," barked Adori. Shivering slightly, I walked over to him. Pablo paused in the doorway, then went inside. "Been swimming?" He gripped my wrist, pulling me down before I could answer. "Sit." There was a long silence before he spoke again. "So this is Carment." He swigged from his hip flask. I could smell the honey brandy from here, thick and sweet. "Home of the banished, some say. Did you know the girl, the dead one?" "Her name was Kata," I said, careful to keep my voice flat. "Yes, she was friends with my sister." "Your sister had an interesting assortment of friends," remarked the governor. "She has, sir." My hand gripped the satchel so tight my knuckles clicked. I wish Pablo had not gone inside. "Tell me, boy, do you enjoy your work?" "Yes." "You are fortunate then. My father was a governor too, of a town in Afrique. I learnt to fight, helping him to defend it. That is all being a governor is, really, fighting. My father died trying to defend his power." "I'm sorry." "And don't be sorry. I killed him after all." His words hit like a stone and I tried not to flinch. "But I got my punishment. I'm here, aren't I?" He laughed hollowly and drank again from the flask. Now, I thought, I should ask him now. "Why are you here, sir? For punishment?" "For punishment? For redemption? Failed on that count?" "Yes, I was sent." Redemption? I didn't know this word. I hesitated, then asked, "Sent by who?" He was silent a long time, and I wished I was brave enough to look at his face to judge if I had gone too far. "You've asked your question," he said suddenly. "Now I have one for you. Why do you have my daughter's locket around your neck?" I reached up. The locket was sitting over the tunic in plain sight. I scrabbled about for an answer, heartbeat loud in my ears. "Don't bother lying," said the governor. His eyes were dull and dark as coals. "She gave it to my sister," I said finally. The governor nodded for me to continue. It took a few seconds to find where to start, and eventually I settled on Lupe, sending Kata to look for dragon fruit, and ending with the letter. I missed out disguising myself as Gabo. The governor listened silently. Finally he spoke. "Do you believe in fate?" "Yes, no, maybe," I said. "Give me an answer, boy." "My da says it's a word used by people who don't want to take responsibility for their own lives." Governor Adori chuckled, a low rumble that held about as much warmth as Marquez's eyes. "Does your dad talk to you about his childhood, about growing up and why he became a cartographer?" "Yes." "I don't understand why men tell their children such things," he sneered. "It's weak. It's deathbed talk." I didn't know what to say to this. I couldn't tell him I thought Da was the strongest person I knew. "Do you want it back?" I said. "The locket?" He blinked at the fire. "It was Lupe's. It was hers to give, and I doubt she has a use for it now." There it was. He thought she was gone. You're wrong. I wanted to shout, to scream at him for giving up on her, but I only bit my lip and hated myself for it. "Still, I'll have revenge." His eyes glinted. "It's what governors do." He laughed so suddenly I jumped, knocking his arm. He looked down at the dark material of his cloak, at the darkest stains spreading from the split hip flask. I held my breath. "Governor?" Marquez emerged from the house. The governor turned to look at him and waved him forward. "Take this," Governor Dory said, throwing his cloak at me. "That stain needs to be out by tomorrow." I took it and stumbled away. As I passed Marquez, he gripped my arm. "I'm watching you, boy." I reached the house and stood pressed against the inside wall. I felt as though I'd escaped a forest fire with only singes. Pablo gave me a worried look, but I closed my eyes so tightly they buzzed. "Do you believe in fate?" He'd killed his father. If I had not been sure of his cruelty before, I could be sure of it now. I could not let down my guard around him. And Lupe, he thought she was dead. I let that settle heavily on me. I had to believe twice as hard that she wasn't. "Why'd you have his cloak?" My eyes snapped open. Pablo was standing very close. I peered past him into a large one-roomed building with high windows. The others were playing cards around the glowing shard of Dar's walking stick. No one had looked up. "Isa, are you all right?" "Don't call me that," I snapped, pushing past him. "I have to work." He frowned, but I ignored him. The conversation with the governor had knotted my insides. I flung the cloak to one side. I would not do anything for that man. Lupe deserved so much better than a murderer for a father. I wanted home, and maps were as close as I could get to it now Miss Law was gone. I spread the materials out in a corner, turning my back on Pablo. The star charts had dried, but were torn and smudged. They were useless. "Sorry, Dar." I looked at the slice of sky through the window high above me. The North Star glinted back. If I could anchor its position... I began to draw, imagining our journey backwards from where I sat. I traced the route along the beach, the ground sloping down. I drew the spidery estuary of the river, then the slow, long curve of the beach to Gree, with its X of blood and teeth, marking the tree line and our route all the way to Arrington. Finally, my lines met those I had drawn on our first day in the Forgotten Territories, when all of this felt exciting as well as scary. When I felt as adventurous as Arinta, sitting beside her waterfall, heart still full of hope that we would find Lupe, and seeing Mars' map reveal its secret paths to me. I pulled out the ancient map and ran a finger over its surface. "Please," I whispered, "change." But the map only rustled mockingly, ordinary as ever. I rolled it back up and put my mess of a new map away too. It was not like Dar's. I was stupid for thinking it would be. I looked at it and saw scale, landscape, landmarks, but no sense of the island I had longed to see. It sat dead on the ground, simply ink on paper. Dar's maps always felt alive, like they were made of more. Ink, paper, and something else, something living. But there was no point trying to make it better now, not with my head so heavy, my eyes so tired. I rested my head on the satchel and pulled the cloak up around my chin to stop the draft. As the men played cards and swapped jokes, I dreamt of long ago murdered fathers and living maps that shifted like sand beneath my fingers. "Isabella," Pablo's voice close to my ear, "can you hear that?" I sat up listening. I could. A low whistle, just audible above the wind. I peered into the shadow. "Where's the governor?" said George blearily. "Let's go find him," hissed one of the others. "Not you two, you'll get in the way," said Marquez as Pablo and I stood. "I can help," said Pablo, drawing out his small knife. Marquez snorted. "Not with that you can't. Take this." He drew a second sword from his belt. Pablo took it and shook his head at me. "Stay here. I'll come back as soon as I know what's happening." I nodded as the men drew their swords and left silently, lifting their feet. The door closed. I was suddenly alone. The woodlight was still on the table, and I tucked it into my belt as I strained my ears, listening for another whistle, but none came. I didn't know whether to relax or worry. A few minutes dragged by, and still all I could hear was the wind. Then came the unmistakable sound of a man shouting out in pain, one guttural note that died almost instantly. My skin prickled. I drew Dar's blade. I didn't want to sit and wait to find out what was happening. I put the governor's dark cloak to conceal the woodlight's glow, and pushed the door ajar. It creaked loudly. The curved expanse was empty, the black sea swirling beyond. The fire where Adori and I had sat was out. A sudden scuffling came from behind the house. Trying to breathe as quietly as possible, I crept towards it, rounding a corner. I clapped my hand over my mouth to stifle a cry. Marquez was lying there, eyes glassy and sightless. His hands were tied in front of him, but his chest was still rising and falling. He was alive, but where was his attacker? I had to find Pablo. I shrank back into the shadows, running on as silently as I could. My foot caught on something and I almost fell. Panic chased up my insides. It was another one of the governor's men, unconscious and tied. A rustling noise came from behind me and I ducked, thoughts racing. I had the blade and the woodlight, my satchel. I could get on a horse and go, follow the coast until I hit the ridge and had to take to the forest. I could make it home. No, said another, more insistent voice. I should try to find Pablo. I couldn't leave like this. Arinta would not. I straightened and turned back to the square. A smell like burning ships filled my head. Then my hands were being wrenched behind me. I kicked out and opened my mouth to scream, but a bitter substance was forced in, dissolving on my tongue. My gums went numb, blood running cold. The world slipped away as thick smog clouded my limbs. Dust filled my mouth as I fell forward into blackness. Oh dear, I think Isabella is in some trouble. Okay, I'll be back soon. Take care, everyone. I miss you loads. It's really weird being here in school without any of you. I'll be back real soon. Keep in touch with me. Bye.